Fit for Life Radio, episode number 155.
What's good?
I'm Gary,
I'm Will.
and today we are talking about why you feel stressed. Are you a stressed out person? Are you a Zen person?
What does it mean, actually, physiologically, when you're like, I feel stressed or overwhelmed or whatever the feeling might be?
And really, we're reviewing a study, so it's just one little, piece of information to help people learn and
Just a little
shed
snip.
light. And it's really interesting, really good. It's again through the PN Precision Nutrition Academy.
I think it's a really good takeaway.
And yeah, we'll just kind of dive into the little overview of the study, what it found out. And again, it was comparing kind of people who identify as super stressed versus people who identify as Zen. And if there is a physiological result component to this, meaning, man, if you're always feeling stressed, is there like this that can be there's psychological, mental, but then there's physiological, which is like happenings in your body.
Actually a physical reaction.
And yeah, if you're stressed all the time and then there's these negative consequences to your body, that's no bueno. And it also means there's a lot to try and change in a way, because no one wants to be stressed. But yeah, so the study
Set it up.
in general, when we say I'm stressed out, it's in reference to feeling anxious and overwhelmed and struggling with situations. And a lot of times we stress over things that haven't even happened, right? So which that right there is a little nugget, a little precursor probably to the solution. Yeah. Noun. Yeah, some people describe kind of their everyday baseline state as high stressor. And I remember a phrase that I've heard before, from someone, I don't know where, but it was like, it was along the lines of, we aren't stressed, we do stressed. And now I'm thinking about that, and then what this little study and what it kind of some stuff it showed, it makes even more sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the research, they wanted to kind of test some of this out and see if it causes physiological dysfunctions that lead to long-term problems. So if you're someone who identifies as high stress, you're probably holding your breath right now.
So please breathe.
So, and that is because both acute and chronic stress have been shown to increase stress biomarkers, such as cortisol.
Yeah, which is quote unquote the stress hormone, if you want to give it a name.
So that's kind of the way that I believe they test to, and for the physiological markers is like, hey, what's happening to your cortisol?
Yeah.
And this was the University of Montreal researchers, and their kind of motivation again was curious if very stressed out people exhibit higher biomarkers of stress than those who are more Zen. So is there perceived stress driving physiological changes that impact how they feel and act?
So basically, like, when you're like, oh my God, I'm so stressed out, does that actually make you more stressed out? Like your body, does it cause that response?
Yeah, cause problems.
Is
right?
what they're really looking at.
And they took like 123 healthy volunteers who self-identified as either Zen or very stressed out. And then they put them through a bunch of tests, physiological or psychological and emotional assessments to determine how they were feeling, and then see how it manifested itself in their blood work. So the test could have, a lot of them were measured subjective things. So ratings of perceived stress, depressive symptoms, anxiety, emotional regulation, resilience, and mind wandering. One assessment was the Trier Social Stress Test, acronym TSST, which involves a 10-minute anticipation period followed by a 5-minute speech and a 5-minute mental arithmetic test in front of judges.
Damn.
So
that's like some people's worst nightmare.
I know. I can see some people just sweating bullets right now.
Oh my God.
So I've always been like more along the lines of very stressed, or like I shy and anxiety ridden. And I remember when I went to college, and I had to I was in a business major to start, and I had like a public speaking class, dude, first semester, and I don't know how I think I did. I like blacked out, yeah, because you're waiting for your turn, you're waiting for your turn, And I was so nervous, Other people are going, your turn. So it's kind of like this test.
Yeah, it's like building it up.
Before it even happens, it comes. And, yeah, dude, I mean, that's how I would be. But then over time, I know, you force yourself into certain situations and you get better at it. But,
that's one. I did public speaking my first semester, too. And I've always been okay at that, but still kind of on the more anxious side. Mm-hmm. And thinking back, because for my job, like I got to talk in front of people all the time and, kind of on the stage. So now it wouldn't bother me so much. So I'm a little more conditioned for it. But yeah, like back then if you're not first, like being first was the best, I think, because you could just get up there. You're not thinking about it. You just go. If you're last, man, you've had the whole time to just think about this is going to suck. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
Yep. So
why is that everyone's nightmare, public speaking?
Well, it's not everyone's nightmare.
Well, I guess it's not. Yeah, I guess you're right.
And so then that was a test they did, and then they tested the actual physiological cortisol stuff, which we'll get into. And so that's what they did. And then the results. Okay. So the two groups, as expected, differed significantly on most of the psychological and emotional assessments.
Which were things like depressive state, anxiety, I think, right?
all the stuff. So, but the scientists found no differences in their biomarkers of stress. So the physiological.
So the cortisol didn't change.
Yep.
Like the one group didn't get more of a surge than the other. Mm-hmm. Which I actually, before we read this, thought it would not be that way.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we read it.
Yeah, it's the reality is like the physiological stuff is kind of going on in everyone. For example, the very stressed out group scored significantly higher on the tendency to ruminate over stressful events, their capacity to inhibit hostile behaviors, and their capacity to control impulsivity. So yeah, in reality, like you're in your head way more mm-hmm. when you're very very stressed out, which can have good, like you avoid certain situations, you avoid impulsive decisions, right, which can be good, but you also kind of almost stress yourself out more over ruminating over what could have happened or what did happen, and that's really all in you creating that. Mm-hmm. So, and also overall, the more very stressed out group had more symptoms of depression and anxiety and had a lower ability to regulate emotions. The Zen group, on the other hand, they scored higher for resilience, emotional stability, and positive mental health. Now, again, from this study, that's what we see on the psychological side of things. But again, physiologically, they were the same. Mm-hmm. So that, in a way, is good news.
I think it is good news because then it just tells us that it's more our response to things.
And how we handle things, and that is easier to change, right? So essentially our ability to regulate emotions, is what it kind of comes down to. So, and then when they look, they have these cool little graphs, but of the cortisol levels. And really the only difference was, between the Zen group and the very stressed group, like throughout the day, their cortisol levels were the same. The very stressed group did have a little higher spike 30 minutes after waking. And, theoretically, you could contribute that to the fact that the very stressed out group probably wakes with a feeling of kind of like mental overload and creates a negative.
So you're kind of starting in a negative spot.
Yeah, they create a negative outlook of the day, which
like, it's got to do this again, or whatever it may be.
And that, impacts their cortisol secretion.
Briefly.
Because that's what wakes us, is cortisol secretion. So you're going to have it no matter what. And then, you kind of attach these things at that kind of peak moment. And, it does tend to boost it. But then the rest of the day kind of falls in line with the same as the Zen people. And then with that test we talked about, the TSST, where it's like you got to prepare, have the speech, yada yada
Do your
yada.
math.
The cortisol levels throughout, and they measured it like 30 minutes before, 20 minutes, 10 minutes, during, 10 after, 20 after, 30 after, 40 after, and basically their cortisol levels were the same. Actually, looking at the chart, the Zen group was a little higher at peaks, but ultimately, yeah, it's the same, right?
Yeah.
So again, it comes down to kind of good news in that you're not necessarily ruining yourself on some physiological level, and that the stress is actually there, that physiological stress for everyone. Again, it's how we perceive it and handle it mentally.
Yeah. And that does have, downstream effects. Like you said, more depressive thoughts, things like that are kind of a side effect of that,
Yeah.
more stressed type person. But you can change it,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's more of an outlook thing, and learning to manage your emotions and negative thoughts and all of that, which isn't easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's doable.
Yeah. And you can also speculate, because this test was done like super short term, right?
Mhm.
So that they don't necessarily know, like, if you have these persistent feelings of psychological stress, it might eventually lead to physiological problems,
Yeah.
right?
That would be interesting to
Um,
see it over, I don't know, 6 months or a year.
Yeah, in decades, right?
Which is a pretty
Um,
intensive test, but
But essentially, what can you control? And yeah, you can control how you kind of handle your emotions and stress, right? And that's something that can be changed and can be done, that you can work at. Learning to manage your stress is doable and is like, something you can do.
absolutely.
So that would be kind of like the main takeaway is, hey, at least in the short term, these kind of like thoughts and how we identify if we're stressed or zen.
They're not locked in. They're not
Yeah.
set in stone,
Yeah.
which is good.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes people think that, like, I am just a stressed person, and that's the end of the day.
Yeah.
Like, you can't change it. There's nothing. That's how I was built and programmed. But like, you can. Like,
Yeah.
you could become somebody who handles stress very well, and then your baseline is a little lower, and you feel a little more chill.
Yep. And one of the takeaways, basically what you just mentioned is, yeah, don't accept being stressed out as a fact of life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a majority of people, probably more than most
Yeah,
that feel
I would say it's
that
the
way.
majority.
But if you even that alone can give you a boost, right? To know that, hey, I just need to learn and work on regulating my emotions better.
Yeah. And I mean, that could be just, how you react to a stressful situation, a stressful event, just hard conversations,
Yep.
and just bringing a little more awareness to it, like we talk about with most things, would probably be a big step.
Yeah.
And like, oh, well, how did I react to that situation?
Mm-hmm.
Was it appropriate? Did I, was it too strong? And just working at it.
Yeah. And I think one good one too is, a lot of times we just stress over things that might happen, and you can almost have a little thought game where you just ask yourself, am I stressing over something that's like happened, that's happening, that's about to, or like literally something I'm creating?
Yeah. Did I make this whole situation up?
If you know me, you know I'm always on the run, up early and home late, so having a 3-hour morning routine isn't really in the cards for me. What is in the cards is AG1. It's a fast way to get vitamins and minerals I need to perform. I first gave AG1 a try because I wanted a single solution that helps support my entire body by filling in nutrient gaps and simplifying my morning routine. Since drinking AG1 daily, I've always felt strong and energized and ready to attack the day. Not only does AG1 deliver my daily dose of vitamins, minerals, pre- and probiotics, and more, it's a powerful, healthy habit that's also powerfully simple. It's one scoop mixed in water once a day and every day. I know that AG1 is giving my body high-quality nutrition. Every batch of AG1 goes through a rigorous testing process, so you know that it's safe. And AG1 ingredients are sourced for absorption, potency, and nutrition density. AG1 is a supplement that I trust to provide the support my body needs daily, and that's why I'm excited to welcome them as a new partner. Here is your chance to start every day this season with a gift to yourself. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3K2 and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase exclusively at drinkag1.com/ Proven Grit. That's drinkag1.com/proven grit. Check it out.
Which happens a lot.
Yeah. Or it could be something that could happen. Like we ruminate on the ruminate on the
A ruminant
ruminate
is a cow.
Yeah. Steak. On the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Right. But the
And
reality
then we
is
build it up like, hey, this is going to happen. And the reality is it's probably not.
So now think about it. All we're literally doing is just putting ourselves through a psychological warfare.
Yeah. And again, it's not like it's easy to just be like, turn this off, but you can work at it.
Yeah.
You know, it is something you can change.
I think even knowing, or at least even being able to tell yourself, like, because then it's almost like it, might snowball to where we're like, oh, I'm stressed and I'm causing my body harm. And then that stresses out even more. But, hey, if you can almost tell yourself, hey, you're not causing your body harm.
Yeah, like this is okay. Like
you're just causing your body, you're just making your brain go crazy, right?
It's like the alarms are going off, but nothing's exactly wrong.
Yeah.
So like you can just like turn the alarm off and like your body will be okay.
Yeah.
So and yeah, that might be a little bit freeing for some people, so they're not as, poor in their response to the stress that they have.
Yep.
It's a big rabbit hole, and there's a lot to stress and stress responses and all of that. But I think this is a pretty good little nugget for most people.
Yeah, and what are some ways to handle your thinking, better deal with stress? A lot of cliche things that, they feel silly, but
A lot of cliches like that work though.
Yep. And like a few are, one is, let's see, a good, having, like we mentioned, kind of creating a negative mental filter. So again, we tend to highlight and dwell mostly on the negatives and generally ignore the positives. So that's where like the cliche of gratitude journaling. But again, it feels silly in your mind. But the reality is like, well, you need to tell your mind we're stressed because we're always talking about the negative
We're
things.
dwelling on the
in our
negative
mind.
and what could happen.
So when you talk about what could go right, hey, you start to retrain your brain a little bit.
Yeah, and something as simple as gratitude journaling, like 3 things you're thankful for every day. That helps a lot.
Yep. And parlaying off of that is, then we discount the positives. So then good things are happening. They do happen, and we kind of like shrug them off, instead of like celebrating them.
Yeah, we just don't acknowledge a lot of good things.
So another cliche: celebrate your wins.
Yeah,
all your wins. Create little wins.
I think a lot of us write off the little stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then we run into that with people in the gym and with our nutrition coaching, is that it could be something like, well, this person lost a pound a week for a month.
Yeah,
and they're like, they think it's terrible, because it wasn't enough. We're like, damn, that's the gold standard and the best you can really expect for most people. Like, you should be celebrating that. And instead, most people are like, oh, that's not good enough. And that's just happens across the board in a lot of different aspects.
Yeah. And then another one, a common one I know is like people will tend to almost create stories that like in their head and then stress over that. Like, so example could be like, especially when you're new to something, like we, have a gym, work at the gym, work with coaching clients. And like when people start things, they think that everyone's I'm not as good at this. I'm uncoordinated, and
everyone's making fun of you.
Everyone's making fun of me and notice me and laugh. When the reality is like no one is. And if they are, they're thinking, man, like look, you're typically motivating them because it puts everyone back to a place where they were a beginner and how hard that is. And hey, this person's pushing through. That's motivating. You know, so it's really probably a positive story if you want to tell yourself anything.
But we just assume the worst generally.
Yeah.
That's a big one.
So you have, gratitude journaling, celebrating your wins, not creating stories.
Yeah, those are 3 really actionable ones. I
mean,
I don't think you need to go much beyond that for most people. It's a good start.
And you can do those things that, it's really flipping your thoughts to yourself from negative to positive, and you catch yourself, but eventually.
Yeah, it's not like it's gonna be all of a sudden you're just like the most positive person in the world, but man, if you're shifting a little bit, like you're gonna have times where you maybe shift to like negative thinking or stressing, but if there's more towards the positive side than the negative, then you're doing a really good job.
Yeah. And one last good one here is blame. So people tend to, find the fault instead of problem solving,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And that's where this one too is like, especially have like with business and things like that, you have to, if you're going to be successful and make it work over the long term, you have to be a problem solver, and you have to see,
Absolutely.
one thing I know in the business world is like new levels, new devils, so that phrase means like, yeah, you're going to get to new levels, and which is great, and you celebrate that, but I think there's still going to be problems, right? New problems, but
There's always going to be problems.
but it's good problems, right? And when you approach them like that, hey, these are just problems to be solved, then it's a whole different mindset shift.
Instead
right?
of trying to figure out, well, whose fault is it that we have
Yeah.
this problem? What doesn't solve anything?
Yep.
So that was a good one.
Yeah, and you can also see too, like a foundation of life lessons of athletics.
Mm-hmm.
Because you learn a lot from sports because you have to have these mindsets to like get better and keep going, and there's failures built in, right? No one just starts a sport and competes and is great at everything and wins every single time, which now I say this out loud, and unfortunately, like, it is sad then you realize when people try to take winner and loser out of it.
Yeah.
But the reality is this is, I guess there's people on both sides of the fence, but man, like I almost, when you say it, then there's almost no benefit without a winner and a loser. Like, what are you really learning? You know? Because you have to lose. You have to lose to, like,
Losing's fine.
yeah, because in theory it'd be like, why did we lose?
Yeah.
Why did I lose? And then you go and you look at where you can improve, and now you start developing the mindset of being a problem solver.
Yeah. What can I do better?
And then guess what happens? You stick with it. You might go win. You make some changes, and then you go win. And then now you create a little loop of reward for problem solving. And you just, again, it helps you grow, right?
We need problem solvers.
So yeah, when you're young, right? Obviously, you can't sit down a little kid and be like, tell them about this.
No.
Right? So that's where like things like sports and
They're great
Yeah.
They're great teachers.
I never got in anything, right? It doesn't have to be sports. Now that you think about it, like there's music, and yeah, that's why same thing. Like someone learns to play an instrument and they mess up the notes, you got to tell them that was wrong, or hey, you can do this a little better, and yeah, that may hurt someone's feelings at first, but that's how you again solve problems, get better, evolve.
And then you hit the note in the song, and everything's good.
Yeah, and then you go put on your show, and it's great, and everyone claps and cheers, and you get this hit of satisfaction, and
and those quote unquote losses paid off because it made you better because you improved.
Yeah, and you're creating like, hey, look, like I did something positive, I did something good, and
Yeah, I do think losing's important, and also your framing of that is very important. I'm glad I did a lot of sports as a kid because it helped me with a lot of that stuff, and and not playing the blame game, because if you play a blame game as a team, which will happen in sports, but it's not that beneficial.
Yeah.
In the moment, when someone's getting blamed for something, it doesn't solve problems in the game. You might talk about it afterwards, but figuring out, all right, well, where can we pivot is more of a solution in that moment.
Yeah.
So that's good takeaways.
I always find it funny too when people criticize like elite athletes that are come across as somewhat arrogant, and I'm like, well, in reality, that's probably a big reason they got to where they are. Like look at Muhammad Ali.
Yeah, he was real full of himself.
And it's like that's better than being like him walking around saying I suck and I'm awful, right?
Yeah.
Like you gotta.
He was the greatest ever.
You can't hype
in his own head.
Yeah, and if you can't hype yourself up, and yeah. So again, to bring it back, like this study is, if anything, good news, right? Trying to identify if people who identify as very stressed out versus people who identify as Zen, those are psychological things.
Not a whole lot of change in the body in the moment.
Yeah, is there change in physiologically in the body? And the answer is from this study, which is short termed, no, there's not. Like they both showed similar cortisol levels and all that. And the reality is that probably most of the perceived stressed out is just a lack of ability to handle emotions, right? You're not as emotionally flexible and whatnot. And the great thing with that is that's can be improved, right? We can improve that, and then that's where things like, again, gratitude journaling, focusing on the positive, not diminishing the positive, and yeah, kind of corny, cliche things, but yeah, that's how you can maybe remove yourself from being in a super stressed out psychological state.
Yeah, just a little shift.
And again, I know for me personally, a easy one is, yeah, just notice how many things you stress about that aren't even that are only best case might happen.
Yeah.
And you realize, oh, I'm like, yeah. Then that comes back to the phrase that I know has resonated, where hey, we aren't stressed, we do stressed.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is, yeah, most of the stress we experience psychologically is just us.
Yeah, us creating it.
Literally creating it, like,
Yeah, so just keep an eye out when you're having a shower argument with somebody, and you're getting really worked up about a conversation that's never going to happen.
Yeah.
Because I know everybody has those.
Mm-hmm. And
So-
like, on this test they do where you do the little public speak and prepare. Most of the stress, psychological stress, is like you think about what could go wrong or what everyone else is thinking.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I'm going to mess up. They're gonna
beforehand,
laugh at
right?
me.
When the reality is most of the time half the
It
people aren't
goes-
paying attention.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Most people are probably on their phones and
Yeah.
everything goes fine
Yep.
unless you black out.
So there you go. And again, that was done by, what was it? It was like a Canadian. If you want to
Peep it.
peep it, where we at? The University of Montreal.
There we go.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't tell you where Montreal was. I know it's in Canada, but that's
I think
as
it's
good as it
on
gets.
the right side, like the eastern side.
Is it? I think you're wrong. But I just don't know enough. Canada's freaking huge. I guess I could look at my.
Here we
No,
go.
it is. It's in Quebec.
Look at that. Look at me.
What is it? Is it where you?
Yeah, so it's kind of like right above us.
Man, sorry to all the Canadians out there. I
Yeah.
swear I didn't mean it.
You weren't even close, man. Yes, because like the British.
What was I thinking of?
You were
What's
probably
the one
thinking
on
of
the West Coast.
Vancouver. Vancouver, yeah.
Yeah,
Because those are like two of the bigger cities.
yeah, and they're they're decently close to the United States.
I wonder if we have any Canadians listening.
I'm sure we do. I'm sorry if I shamed you.
I know this because I was in a group, like a business gym owner group,
Mm-hmm.
and there was someone in there from Montreal and someone in there from
Vancouver.
and I remember like learning then.
And damn, they're like as close to the U.S. as you can get without
Yeah.
being
In
American.
the US, yeah.
damn.
So there we go. Appreciate that. That was a good study.
Yeah, that
I
was
know. I like hearing that answer is cool because sometimes, yeah, you can get on that loop of where you're like, I'm stressing and now I'm this is unhealthy for me and
And it just makes it worse.
in my body, and then I'm stressed more and I can't get out of this loop. When the reality is like most of it's psychological. Again, the negative to the study was it was kind
It
of
was short,
Ma-
but-
over time it could compound, but
in the moment, and sometimes in the moment is all you need to
Yeah,
make a change.
just-
So
change some habits. Get put on that Tony Robbins.
yeah,
Get that gratitude, hype yourself up. All right. Well, hopefully you enjoyed that. It's a big part. We've been doing in the fitness industry for years, and it's funny. I think I start back in the beginning. 17 years ago, it was like all about exercise, right? Like just everyone, wants to look better, feel better, and it's just like exercise. That's all you did. As a trainer, I remember it's just like people show up, you train them, they leave,
And
everyone's
that's
like,
it.
hey, I'm gonna look like X, Y, Z and feel X, Y. But then we learn over the years like, okay, it's a part of it, but not even the biggest piece. And then you learn about nutrition and it's like, okay, this is a big factor. And now you start to see, stress management
is a big part of it.
and people have to find ways to deal with that. And then it all ties together. So get that stress management, prioritize.
Yeah.
We appreciate you for listening.
All right. See you next time.
See ya.
As always, thanks for listening, guys. If you want to learn more, check us out at coastalfitnessva.com or garydeagle.com. We'll see you next time.